Yes, sir. Run Pure Sports MMA. We've got UFC Magny versus Prates here tonight. An 11-fight card. Unfortunately, I already had a few fights scratched, but there's still winners to be picked, and that's why we're here. Got my man Dan with me. Dan, how are you doing here? How was yesterday? How was last week's card for you? How did you do last week? All right.
Betting was great. DFS was not great. I think I was up top there. I was up top with I was probably like the third build back. What was even the main event last week? See, these cards happen and I just like completely wiped them from my memory and move on. But that was that was Edmonton, right? So we had Moreno Albazi. So yeah, I didn't do great because Moreno ended up not being optimal in his win.
Which is crazy.
I double shoved the mains. It's we talk about it all the time, but when you have just like pure striking battles without a finish, even sometimes at a 5-rounder, it's not going to get there. I think he scored what, like in the 80s somewhere, and that's just not going to do it. So betting wise was great. DFS not so great. So
yeah,
next week.
I had a decent week from a betting and DFS standpoint. I didn't get to the full top. I did fade the main event though, like on my main team, which was obviously good. I somehow faded that. But I can't remember. There was one guy who I was pretty high on that was a dog, but he ended up losing. I had a loser on a lot of my teams, but my boy Stolzfus, or however you say his name, I had a ton of him. He helped me out a ton. I had him inside the distance too, which was nice and nice, healthy, plus 500, 450, whatever it was. So that was a fun little bet that I had. And I knew if he was winning like that type of way. Like it was either he gets them on the ground and finishes them, or they just get in a swinging fest where, hey, at that, in a brawl, it's 50-50. I'll take my chances there with someone like him. He's a dog. So
I was heavier on I was heavier on him. And then Powerbar, he caught some late steam. So I actually ended up going a little heavier on him, which cost me. That turned out that obviously didn't work out. Just like really stupid of him, like showing off like some extremely low IQ. It was like, he got up and I was like, all right, dude, like let's get to the next round. He knew
that Stolzfus was gonna brawl with him. He knew it. He was in front of the fans. He knew. Yeah, couldn't help himself. That's another point though. So Dan, I wanted to bring this up. So I was talking to one of my buddies and I said, man, when we get to these cards where they're like, in different places and stuff like that, countries and everything like that, man, we just got to be a lot more focused on like who's from there and who's getting that judge lean. Because if we even think a fight is going to decision, there's been some really bad decisions of late, especially in some of these cards where they're, they got the hometown bias maybe a little bit and something going on. And we had another one last week. I don't think it was as bad as the one before, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, even just from a betting side, I should just be cold, just betting a lot of these, hometown guys, especially if I think it goes to decision, not if I think it goes inside the distance, because that's the way that they lose a lot of these. But if it goes to decision, man, like there's been some really bad decisions. You're probably up a ton of money if you're betting like a lot of the hometown guys.
I still don't know if I necessarily buy into like the home cooking narrative, but the judging is it's bad. It's real bad.
I don't know. I don't know what else it could be then.
I mean,
I literally don't know what else it could be.
I think the judges just don't know what they're looking at a lot of the time. And like what you also have to remember is they're sitting cage side. And like if you've ever sat like cage side, we had floor seats back when we went to UFC and AC. And it's like the vantage point from there is not the best. So like the judges aren't getting the best views. They don't, they're not looking at, a broadcast feed. They don't get any stats. It's just like what they see from cage side. And
I know, but you're literally your job is to watch the fight and judge the fight, and you are sitting as close as you can be. I know what you're saying from a vantage point because I've also sat on the floor at UFC, and
it's tough.
it is different. It's definitely different, but it's their literal job. So like, I mean, someone's got to be killing these guys. Like, dude, you guys can't keep sucking at your job or something because it's really bad. And I was on the right side of last week. Somehow I got lucky with that. What was the guy's name?
It was Horth and
no, wait.
And Petrovic.
I wasn't even talking about that one. I was talking about the other one. The two, it was two guys. Now I'm forgetting them.
We pull up MMA decisions.
One lost to Tavares, I think. I think it was Tavares the fight before. Damn it, who was it? Chat's gonna tell us.
It was City and Armfield.
Yes, City and Armfield. And I went back and forth on that fight because I thought it was a legit coin flip. I ended up going with City. And I can say, as someone who won money betting City, I was on the wrong side. Armfield was the right side. He won the fight. City knew it. Even when they called his name in the octagon, the camera went like straight into his face, right? Like as close as you can kind of be. And you could just tell he thought he lost. He was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I did not win that fight. Yeah.
He said it in the post-fight presser too. He was like, I thought I lost. So, yeah, it's pretty big indictment of the judging there.
That's just, I guess we got to just, like Easy Bet says, just learn, put it in the process a little bit. It's going to happen, especially if you think, like I said, that some fights are going to go to decision. Those are the fights where you got to really focus in on and be like, okay, who's from where. I think there's more home cooking. Maybe Dan's still not sold on the home cooking, but I definitely think there's a little home cooking going on.
I think that's not a bad idea though, to, when you're building lineups, even if you're like super confident on one side, you just make you leave a little bit of room for, a lot of these judges just don't know what the fuck they're looking at, man. It's crazy. It's insane. I think a problem is like, obviously they go over what the criteria is, but I just think that a lot of these.
Well, I think the criteria changes.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like the criteria? So like damage is supposed to rule overall, right, Dan? Like damage over everything else, right? So, I mean, how many times have we seen where, one guy has the damage done to the other, but the volume is on the other guy's side, or the wrestling takedowns is on the other guy's side, and they'll give it. It's just not consistent. Exactly. I'm for whatever, but once you say this is the criteria, blah, 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 you got to follow it, right? You can't just be like, nope, for this fight, I'm going to change it to wrestling. And for this fight, I'm going to change it to just volume. It just can't happen that way. And it's happening too much. I agree with Steven here. It's definitely some home cooking going on for sure. But all right, whatever. I just wanted to bring it up because I do think it's something interesting to just think about. We don't have to really think about it for this card though, right, Dan? We got it, UFC, fight night card. So I think we'll be okay here. We'll still probably have bad judges, still probably have some bad decisions, but I don't know about home cooking. So we'll be good from that perspective at least. Let's dive into the fights here. Like we said, 11 fights on the card. 2 fights got scratched. I'm kind of pissed because one of the scratch fights was, in my opinion, one of the funner fights on the entire card. The Sopaj Tercios fight, I thought was going to be one of the funner little scraps on the card. So I'm kind of bummed that fight got tossed, but that's okay. We move on. Melissa Mullins here versus Claudia Sangali. Probably said that name wrong, but we'll go with it right now. Claudia is a plus 260 dog. Melissa Mullins minus 325 favorite over on DraftKings Sportsbook. Dan, I'll just start with this one because this is a fight that I do like, and I'm pretty heavy on the Melissa Mullins side. I was against Melissa Mullins in her last fight against Nora because I thought Nora was strong enough, good enough to kind of survive. And I thought the line was insanely wide. And people just thought she was going to run through Nora. She tried to run through Nora and it just didn't work. She ended up kind of like tiring herself out. Nora, ended up like holding up in the grappling, which after that, she found that, that knee or whatever it was and kind of put her down in a way. But it was just one of those fights where I was just like, this is insane. Nora is a good, I think she's a solid, female, fighter here. And this line is minus 250, minus 300 or whatever. Well, that's crazy to me. So I was heavy on her side. I thought the Melissa Mullins side was crazy. I said it on the show. She ends up winning. Now it's like, I think this line should honestly be minus 500. I think this girl, Claudia, is not a UFC fighter. I could be totally off. I think her last fight too, they didn't even allow like clinching in her last fight, if I remember correctly. So, some of the girls she's fight too, just absolute cans, Dan. Like, I mean, like 0-8 type cans right now. So we're talking about, her strength of who she's competed against, which I know to a certain point they can't, they don't have much of a say of who gets put in front of her. I get that. But man, it's just, they're just really bad female competitors. And now she gets someone in Melissa Mullins coming off of a loss where she was a minus, 250 or whatever, big favorite against Nora. And I think she's going to run right through this girl. Like, this girl's got bad footwork. I think her kicks are horrible. She'll just back up too much and then all of a sudden decide to randomly like sit down and stand in the middle of the cage and throw with you. So like, it looks like she's trying to counter you at times and pull you in, but then at times it looks like she wants to brawl. And I just don't get it. Like, I don't think you're going to be able, I don't think that style is going to work here, because if Melissa Mullins is just going to try and bully her and just get her up against the fence, take her down. And then I think she's just going to ground and pound her to a stoppage probably. So I really like the Mullins side. I also think too, inside the distance bets here for Melissa Mullins. I think inside the distance, she's like plus 275, plus 300, depending on where you're looking sportsbook wise. And I did already place that bet. So I'm on the betting side of Melissa Mullins. And I'm on the DFS side of Melissa Mullins. I don't know what the ownership is. I hope you're going to tell me it's low. And you know me, I like going again. I like going after these low-level women's fights. I just think they're the best. They have the most edge from a DFS perspective and a betting perspective. So I'm in on this fight, Dan. I really like it. What about you?
Yeah. So I've got Mullins at 23%. I've got Segula surprisingly at 18%. But, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have a limited amount of fights, and we've got, two fighters we'll get to later in Dos Santos and Prates who are taking up like quite a bit of ownership. So, I think it's definitely Mullins, like you already spoke to. Like, Segula is just not UFC caliber at all. And, she's fighting really low level competition, and she's from Poland. We talk about KSW all the time, which is like the premier promotion in all of Europe. And it's located in Poland. They do a lot of, they have a lot of Polish fighters on the roster. She ain't coming from KSW, she's coming from, what is this? Her last fight was in something called Fame 21, MMA GP. I've never heard of a lot of these promotions. Her first ever professional fight was a bare knuckle fight, which is a pretty massive red flag. Like, if you're a good prospect, if you've got any kind of if you've got any kind of promise, you're not fighting bare knuckle. This is like a thing that guys and girls do in like the twilight of their careers, So not good signs for Segula. Mullins definitely disappointed us last time out versus Cornell, but Cornell is like several levels above whatever Segula is. This whole card, this is going to be like a running theme. This is like a super low level card. They just like need people to fill. We've had fights drop off. I'm not even sure if Segula, I think she's like a late replacement. Let me double check that.
She's in there.
Mullins was supposed to fight Monster at Rendon, but she dropped off. So this is a late replacement. I'm not even sure you'd see Segula on Contender Series, you know? Like, this is...
I don't know how she got the call. Like, how they must have really had nobody else, Dan. They must have really been like, we don't have anyone. We got to call someone.
They were desperate to fill this card. Like, you know, Prates was supposed to fight next week on 309, and they pulled him off of that to come headline this. And, like, you know, we'll get to it later, but, you know, Prates Magny as a headliner is like, you know... It's not really what you expect to see. So all that being said, like, I think, you know, Mullins is also like a pretty underwhelming talent, but she is probably worlds better than Segula. You know, the inside the distance line on this fight as a whole isn't really what you want to see at 8,800. You know, Mullins, you're going to want to, you want domination, which I think is definitely on the table. You know, I've got her ranked like pretty highly. I'm probably going to get to her a bit more than the field. I haven't really started building in earnest yet. Like, I did a couple initial runs in Saber, but it's nothing too solid. I think she definitely has like the grappling advantage. She has an advantage everywhere, but I think that it's definitely on the table that she gets her on the ground. She gets in top control. She grounds and pounds the shit out of her. Even if she's not getting her out of there, she's more than likely getting her down and controlling her. I really don't have any interest in Segula, like, at all. She's got to come in at like,
especially not at 18%. That's insane.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know, I'm playing 150, so I'll probably mix her in a little bit, but it's going to be like low single digits. You know, very low.
I mean, like 5% at most.
Yeah, like
girl.
Yeah, just
I mean, I think she throws pillows. I think her kicks are pretty bad. I don't think she's going to have an advantage on the mat. I literally think she's got a disadvantage almost everywhere. And Steven asked about the volume or the lack of volume of Mullins. I think she gets her out of there. Dan's a little questionable on the gets her out of there portion. I think if she gets this girl to the ground, she's going to ground and pound her to just pushing her face into the mat until the ref just has to stop it. But, you know, obviously there's a world where she tries to bully her and gets tired, kind of like she did with Nora. You know what I mean? I just think Nora was like levels above this girl. And also like Nora's a strong girl. Like if you look at Nora and look at this girl, you're going to be like, oh yeah, there's a big deal. Like she's a strong girl. She at least had some power. And, you know, she kind of showed that a little bit, you know, weathering the storm and then, you know, getting her out. I don't think this girl has that in her. So, you know, I could be totally wrong, but if I'm right and she just tries to bully her like Nora and she finishes her in round one, we're going to have a big score. So I also think she's going to be lower owned compared to the other studs on this card. I would assume she's going to be one of the lower owned, like, top.
She is the lowest owned in this range for sure. It's just without a finish, 8,800. I do, like Steven said, like I do have concerns about her making value. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, because if she doesn't finish, she's probably not going to make value. But
yeah,
if she does, you're getting her at lower ownership. And on these small cards too, those ownership edges can be huge on these small cards. And you're trying to find edges in DFS. And I think she is one of the edges. You know, she only has to outscore like 2 or 3 of the chicks around her or of the chicks or guys around her or above her, which I think is very possible when you look at the others above her that we'll get into. So I know we're spending a lot of time on this fight, but I do actually like it a lot. So I can spend a lot of time on it. Dan, I think is in kind of the middle ground with this fight. Probably what, Dan, the field are you going to get at with Melissa?
Yeah, on Mullins, I really worry about her upside. I think 23%, like that's like she's the lowest in her range for a reason. She's just she's probably going to make her way into a bunch of my lineups just because like I do for the people who use a Saber Sim, you can set like there's like the geo mean metric. So, I have mine set like fairly low to limit dupes. If anybody has a question about that, we can talk about that. I'm always in the chat too,
especially on this card too, right? Where there's just not that many fights and stuff. So
yeah. So she'll make her way in, but I'm in no way excited to play her like at all. She's purely like a contrarian target in my mind.
All right. Well, then just bet her inside the distance. All right. How about that?
That works.
All right. Let's keep going. We got another fight here. Tresean Gore, a -162 favorite here against Anton Troli, a +136 underdog on DraftKings Sportsbook here. Dan, our boy Troli, we were upset last time. He didn't get it done for us. Now he gets Tresean Gore. This is a definitely a different type of fighter from his last fight. I do want to say too with Troli, remember he took that fight against Shara on short notice, had to cut a bunch of weight. He's a pretty big guy too, right? So he had to cut a bunch of weight. And he just didn't have the gas tank. Yeah, like he had 2 rounds. Yeah, flying halfway around. Yeah, exactly. He had 2 rounds in him. He was tired after round 1, honestly. I saw him breathing heavy after round 1. And in the 3rd round, he just had nothing in him. What are you seeing here with Tresean Gore, a guy that I honestly don't love backing as a favorite, to be honest?
Yeah. Just real quick, I got a couple questions about Geomean 777 sub. He's asking, is Geomean setting an ownership range? So basically what Geomean is it is a number. There's a formula that I can also share in the chat, but basically what it is it takes the number of spots in a lineup, the number of entries in a contest, and then it takes the ownership. It's basically a number that, what am I trying to say? Product ownership. So like product ownership is when you multiply all the ownerships together, you divide it by, I believe you divide it by how many entries are in the contest, but it's basically supposed to help you predict dupes based on your ownership number. So real quick, if you want to do that in Saber Sim, you would go to, let's see here. You go to rules, you go to add a new rule, you go to aggregate, and then in the menus down there, you'll go to my own, then geometric mean, and then you go no more than, and the limit that I usually set it at for a card just to start building is around like 30. So that'll give you like a pretty good starting point. Then once you build and run your simulations, you can then in that window filter it lower if you wish. But 30 is usually the number that I like to start at. So the basics is geometric mean is just another way of saying product ownership. And for me, I like to start it at 30 when I build, just to make sure that like I'm not making lineups that are going to make it over like my duplication threshold just to start, because like, those are probably going in the trash anyway. So yeah, if anybody has any more like in-depth questions, I could probably answer them better in the chat. I can share.
No, that was perfect. You broke it down. You showed the people how to get there. So sounded good enough to me. But if you do have more questions, you can always ask Dan, more questions in the Discord. But Dan, Gore and Troli here, which side do you lean on for DFS and betting?
I picked Tresean Gore, but it's really a coin flip. This fight is on a card full of slop. This is like the sloppiest slop that we have. Like there's 2 guys that are like super inactive, not very good. I just have a really hard time getting behind Troli again. He is, you want to talk about low volume. He is super low volume. Tresean Gore is, also low volume, but he throws about 3 times as many strikes as Troli does. We've seen Gore, actually win inside the UFC. We've seen him get some finishes. Again, I don't have a super strong feeling about this. Like, we've got a massive red flag on Gore too, where he's been knocked out by Cody Brundage. So I'm not really looking.
I was about to bring that up. So
it's bad. That is like the reddest of red flags, right? But I think what Gore brings, he's got physicality, he's got strength, even though, Tricoli is the bigger party. He's got solid power. He mixes in takedowns heavily. So like we backed Tricoli against Shara because we said that he would have like the wrestling and grappling advantage. I don't think he has the wrestling advantage here. Gore is going to like heavily pursue the takedown. And I am just not confident in Tricoli's skill. I think that Gore can definitely like out wrestle him. And I'm not really afraid of Tricoli's, I'm not really that scared of his jiu-jitsu. Tresean Gore also has submission upside. I mean, God, this is slop. this is
I think, Dan, I think this fight, Gore is the better DFS play. I think Tricoli is the better bet. And the reason is because, again, like you said, we can pick holes in both these fighters: inactivity, low volume, getting knocked out by Cody Brundage. We can pick holes in both these guys, but Gore definitely has the upside because I think he's going to be the one that is effective in the wrestling out of both of these guys. Now, both of them can grapple too. So Tricoli could have success. He's a bigger guy. He could have some success grappling. He had no success trying to get Shara down for a long period of time until that fence grab where he would have gotten down. But, we thought it was going to happen a lot quicker. That's for sure. Like we thought it was going to be, very, very quick that he'd be able to get him down, and it wasn't. So just one thing to note here. I do think this fight is going to play out, though, in the grappling. I think whoever, wins the grappling exchanges is going to win this fight. If Tresean Gore gets the wrestling going and then, Tricoli can do some stuff in the grappling, I think that's his path. I wish that he threw more, though, and I don't know why he doesn't, because when he throws, he looks like he has power. Even just like the 1-2s, the straights that he throws, they look like, they got some, something behind them, some pretty good power, but he just doesn't throw it a lot. It's like empty pressure, right, Dan? He's like standing in front of the guy. He's trying to pressure him, but he's not actually throwing enough with the pressure. And I don't know if it's because he's afraid he's going to get tired. That could be, a reason. Maybe he's afraid he's going to get tired. So, yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think this is kind of a coin flippy fight. I mean, Gore probably has the edge. Would probably play Gore over Tricoli in DFS, and I'd probably bet Tricoli is how I'm looking at this fight. But it's not a fight that I have a huge stance on. Sometimes in these fights, I'll take a big stance one way or the other. This isn't that type of fight. I don't think I'm going to be heavy on either side. It's more just like, if they fit my roster construction, I'll throw them in. I do think Tresean Gore could wrestle a lot. That wouldn't shock me. So,
yeah, he's averaging like 3 takedowns per 15. So he's going to pursue the takedowns, heavily. I think he's got a pretty big edge there too, because Tricoli's defensive wrestling is pretty terrible. Questions about this fight in particular. Would I include them in 20 max? Yes. I'm not taking anybody out of my pool, except for one fighter that we will get to later. Is the 2-year layoff concerning? Absolutely. Like Gore has pulled out of a ton of fights. His health is like a major question mark / concern. So, going back to
forget too, before Tricoli's last fight, where he obviously lost, he hadn't fought since 2021. So, there's a lot of things going on. That's why I'm like, Tricoli, he's got to look better than he did last time out, just with the whole like flying across the country, like you said, the weight cut, the shortness of time coming off of not fighting for that long. I think he's going to look better. Both guys have things that definitely concern me. So, yeah, I'm probably going to end up betting Tricoli here. But, like Dan said, I don't think you should take them out necessarily, but I don't think they're going to hit a ton on my teams, to be honest with you.
Like if I set my stuff to 20 max and run, I haven't run the sim here. I think I was getting quite a bit more Gore than I was Tricoli.
That would make sense.
Yeah, this is just like I'll probably pass on betting this fight altogether. But I think in a coin flip situation like this, like I don't hate taking the plus money if you feel like you have to bet it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, listen, There's not that many fights on this card, Dan. Let me degen by myself, okay? I'm going to bet it.
I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah. All right, let's get to another fight here. Cody Staman and Damon Blackshear. Both guys coming off of, I mean, like Cody Staman's just one of those guys, when you watch him fight, you're like, he should be better than what I'm actually watching, but he's like not. And so it's frustrating. And that's how I feel about Cody Staman. He's like in fight stand, but he's not winning, right? But he's in it, you know, and it drives me nuts when I watch him. And I think Damon Blackshear is definitely the more talented, maybe the more dangerous guy, I guess, is more what I mean by not talented, but dangerous. But coming off of a KO loss, you just never know how guys are going to react, especially one as bad as the loss he's coming off of. You know, like I said, I think he's got the upside when it comes to finishing, but I think Cody Staman at plus 200 is a great bet. And I'll probably be higher on Cody Staman just in general at the cheap price tag. I need some dogs on my team, but it's definitely a better bet than DFS play. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the Staman side as well. I think it goes to decision. Blackshear is certainly the more dangerous of the two, but I think Staman overall is probably he's a more solid fighter. You know, I think he's got fewer holes in his game. Like, he doesn't really stand out anywhere. He's just sort of like solid everywhere. Whereas Blackshear, you know, I've got concerns about him in the stand-up, obviously getting knocked out last time. And I also just think like Staman's cardio is much better. Like Staman, you know, he hasn't been winning, but you know, it's very hard to get him out of there. He's been submitted twice. He's never been knocked out. So I don't really love Blackshear's prospects of actually getting him out of there. And I think if it goes the distance, Staman is just going to outdog him, because one of the main concerns I have about Blackshear is his cardio. And I have no such concerns for Staman. Now, Staman is 35 to Blackshear's 30. And talk about age. So, you know, as guys get older, especially at these lower weight classes, because this is happening at bantamweight, you know, age, you can just fall off of a cliff at any time. You know, 1 minute you have like no cardio or durability concerns, and then the next minute like father time is catching up to you. But barring that, I think Staman should definitely have like the durability and the cardio edge. When it comes to DFS, let's look at the pricing here. You know, this fight has the lowest odds to finish inside the distance. So, you know, Staman at 7,300, he definitely provides some needed salary relief, especially since you're going to want to be targeting the more expensive guys. You know, you've got Carlos Prates, who's going to be very popular, up at 9,600. You know, RDR, Jillian Robertson, Abdul Malik, like all these, even Denise Gomes, like all these fighters in the 9Ks are people that you're going to want to get to, you know, at a pretty good clip. So Staman definitely helps you get up there. And a decision win, even if it's an underwhelming score at 7,300, can still get you there on a slate like this, where, you know, I'm not in love with too many of the dogs on this card. I picked a lot of favorites, which, you know, for a low level card, that might be a little questionable, but Staman is, I think, one of the more reliable dogs just from like a win equity standpoint. So I think the bet is definitely Staman, but this fight, DFS wise, I'm not super interested in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not very interested in it. If Blackshear gets Cody out of there too, it's by submission, because his grappling is elite. He's got really good grappling. So I just hope Staman, you know, there's times where Staman will just like go for a take, like just I think it's like instinct sometimes where he'll just go for it. But I think he's just got to stay away from those type of grappling scenarios with Blackshear. And if he can do that, you know, it's probably a decision win. But
I think if he gets submitted, it's not going to be Blackshear like taking him down and controlling him.
No, it's going to be him initiating the wrestling or grappling scenario, in Blackshear reacting to that and catching him in something, which
it's going to be something dumb, which
And again, we think this ends in decision, but like Staman's 14-1 to KO a guy that just got literally flatlined. Like literally flat. And sometimes when you said it best. Sometimes when the chin goes, it just goes, or the cardio or whatever it is, it can just go. And that's it. Whether it's age or just dust chin, you just never know.
He's very hittable on the feet as well. Like it's going to be in his best interest to get this to the ground. I just I don't think he's going to be able to keep it on the ground. Staman, like even if he gets it to the ground, Staman's got really solid takedown defense, and he's got great scrambles, great get up. Like
he's a dog.
He's hard to hold down control.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We're both on the same side there. Let's go to the next fight here. We got Matthew Semelsberger. We got Charlie Radkey here. Radkey sitting at a -166 favorite over on DraftKings Sportsbook. This is another one of those fights, Dan. You've got two fighters. I think Radkey's sitting at like 8,500 on DraftKings. Semelsberger 7,700. Got a few of these fights kind of lined in this close to this spot here. I'm on the Semelsberger side. I think this fight, again, it's just one of those other fights. Like, I think it's just more of a coin flippy fight than, Radkey being a -166 favorite here, coming off Prates loss, obviously, which was a huge step up from probably who he beat the two fights before that. So I'm not really dinging him for that loss. I just think Matthew Semelsberger is a dog. And if you go back and watch his fights, Matthew Semelsberger will have moments in almost all of his fights where you're like, oh, he's got a shot or he's doing something good. And then he'll have the moments where you're like, is he trying to lose this fight on purpose? I can't tell right now. But that's how Matthew Semelsberger fights. So it's frustrating. But the fact that I feel like he's still pushing forward, has chances to win, or is doing stuff to try and win, I'm going to take a shot on him at 7,700 on DraftKings. If you watched his last two fights specifically, which honestly the last 4 or 5 guys he's fought, they've been solid fighters, so it's not like he's losing to like really bad fighters in my opinion. But the Parsons loss, right, Dan? So what happened? The first round, it was pretty much a stand-up round. I think Semelsberger lost it, but it was a very close round. There was just not a lot of activity, honestly, on either side. The second round, Matthew Semelsberger, I think, caught Parsons off guard and body lock took him down to the ground. He ended up getting cut from an elbow by Parsons from Parsons' fucking back. And then from that point on, Dan, Parsons just said, fuck it, I'm wrestling you to death. And it was literally a wrestling and grappling match for a round and a half after that happened. And like Semelsberger had a really good get-up game. So like Parsons would take him down, really good takedown. Semelsberger would just like kick him off of him and then like get back up. And then Parsons would push him up against the fence, grab him, take him down again. It just kept happening. And he had the cardio to sustain that. And it was impressive. You know what I mean? But like Semelsberger, literally, it's not like he sat on his back, Dan, and just let him just pound him or anything. He was fighting to get up. He had a guillotine, I think, at one point, but they were just too sweaty. That stuff happens. But, the Medic fight, he knocks Medic down early with just a straight right. He doesn't let Medic get back up. He tries to go on top of him. It doesn't work. Medic ends up finding a finish in the third round. I feel like he's in fights, though, and I feel like he's a good dog to back in these type of closely lined fights. So that's why I'm on the Semelsberger side, and I'll probably be higher on him for DFS at the price tag. What about you?
Yeah, I originally was on Radkey. The line has been moving towards Semelsberger. I think the biggest hole in Semelsberger's game is his defensive wrestling. Like, he can be taken down, he can be controlled. His getup has been pretty poor, but Radkey as a primary grappler, even like his wrestling is not exactly like his strongest suit. And the thing I really what makes me hesitate on Radkey the most is that like he's really undersized for the division, and Semelsberger is like really large for the division. Another like big knock on Semelsberger that like it's kind of confounding. And you touched on it earlier, is that like the guy is like a knockdown machine. He will have people hurt, early in fights, throughout fights. I think he has like 10 knockdowns in his last 10 fights, which is like an absurd ratio of knockdowns to fights. He kind of seems to just like lack that killer instinct for whatever reason. I remember watching a fight as well where like his corner like explicitly told him to like disengage once he had someone hurt, which was really, really strange to me. So I picked Semelsberger mostly because of the line movement, and also just because like I think size and physicality will be on his side, but I don't love it. This to me is also another like kind of coin flippy fight. So I don't hate taking like the plus money on Semelsberger. As far as DFS goes, like this is a fight in the mid range that has lost a ton of fights. It's not the most likely to finish inside the distance. Again, I have Semelsberger by decision, but the guy is a knockdown machine, and he's going to have a pretty sizable size advantage. So I don't hate going to Semelsberger for salary relief on my initial runs. Oh, wow. Actually, on my initial runs, I really am getting almost none of him, which is surprising to me. I am getting much more
Radkey.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I have to bump this up to 150.
Is this round 3, 45 to 1? What is that? Is that for Semelsberger? That can't be KO.
I think that was Staman round 3.
Oh, that was Staman. Okay. I was like, no way that's Semelsberger.
Yeah, my initial runs, I'm getting much more Radkey than I am Semelsberger. So,
well, you better fix that fight.
On this one, I might flip back to Radkey. The size
Boo.
thing, the size thing is what really.
This is what happens when me and Dan agreed too much on fights early, guys. You see that? Dan's like, fuck, me and JSU have agreed on like 3 different fights already. I better flip. We can't be agreeing on too many fights.
Has nothing to do with that, I promise. Yeah,
one card, Dan.
Coming in, I just like really, Semelsberger is very unreliable. He's been on a really bad run. I think he makes bad decisions.
Yeah, the question is not Semelsberger, because we know Semelsberger. I think the question is more how you view Radkey. I think because what Semelsberger is. I think we know what he is, and I think we know what he can do. I think it's more just, do you view Radkey as someone on his level? Like for me, Semelsberger's fought a bunch of guys that are on like his level, maybe a little better, like a smidge better, but like it's not like he got dominated in a lot. Like they were closer. Is Radkey on that same level is more the question that I have.
I think so.
Prates was probably a step above, obviously.
I don't think Semelsberger is particularly high level.
I mean, I think the guys he fought are way better than the guys, besides Prates, the guys that Radkey's fought, the 2 guys before that. So,
yeah, it's tough, man.
I think Parsons would do a similar thing to Radkey.
I will say, even though Radkey's wrestling is, his offensive wrestling is not good, he does have some pretty solid grappling and submission skills. And given that Semelsberger does really struggle off of his back and struggles to get up, I think
I'm telling you, that Parsons fight, you're giving him no credit. He got up. I can't remember how many times he got taken down. He got up like 5 or 6 times in that fight, like instantly too.
He got taken down 4 times.
Yeah, but Radkey's not going to be able to do that. Radkey doesn't have that type of This was like true like wrestling. Like these weren't just like, this was wrestling like just got picked up and I don't think Radkey's going to be doing that to Semelsberger. You brought up the size advantage. Like I just can't see him doing that for 3 rounds either. Like this dude did that for a whole round and a half, just nonstop on him the entire time. Maybe Radkey's that type of wrestler. I don't think he is though. You've already said he's not. He's got good grappling.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's got solid cardio as well. I do kind of question Semelsberger's like cardio once we get later into fights. I think I might be flipping a Radkey here.
Yeah, flip back over. You're not on our side. Get out of here. We don't want you on our side.
I'm doing
All right. Me and Dan are split on that fight here. Let's move to the next fight here. We got Zaleski dos Santos versus Zachary Scrungen. I watched a little tape on Sir Zachary here, and he is not fighting the best of competition either. Dan, one guy had like full head of gray hair. He was only 39, but he legit had just like straight like gray or white hair. I was like, what in the world? Is this dude 55 years old?
He was 19 and 14.
Yes, that guy. Yeah, the guy who's lost like 5 in a row and is like 40 years old. Again, age, like you said, like some guys can go past it, but at some point, like age gets to you. Age gets to everybody. But it's just funny that like that's who he was fighting. I think the past 2 guys he's fought were like 40. So that's something interesting. Now he gets Dos Santos on short notice. What are we doing here, Dan? Because the price difference, $8K, 6,700. I assume Dos Santos is going to be heavily owned, right?
Yeah, I've got him projected at 60% owned, and I think that that's far too low. Like you already mentioned, Scroggin, similar to Segula, who we talked about earlier. This guy should not be in the UFC. He should not be. He should not even like this guy. This guy would not make it on Contender Series. This is like, again, we've talked about like they're desperate for people to fill this card. We've lost 2 fights. I mean, like when we lost the Johns Garbrandt fight, like they couldn't even find a replacement to fill in on that fight. So like they are really, really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Obviously, I think it's Dos Santos. The line is not bettable. He's a minus 740 favorite right now. If you want to go inside the distance, that's minus 145. But I'm also not like, I think that's the bet. If you want to make a bet, I'll probably stay away from this one because, in my 150, I'm very, very seriously considering just locking Dos Santos at 100%. Like a minus 740 favorite, minus 145 to end inside the distance. He's plus 185 to win in round 1. I think at flat 8K. Like, I think you need to consider locking that.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy how high owned he is on an 11 fight slate. I mean, I get it. He's 8K. Now he's fought in much better competition, obviously, but from a DFS perspective, it's not like this guy has been scoring a lot, but I guess you could just point more to who he's been fighting and say like, hey, listen, he's fighting, Fakhretdinov and Brown is solid. These are better fighters, obviously, than what we're looking at in Zachary Scrungen or whatever his name is. I do think, though, Dan, if you're making one lineup on DraftKings and throwing it in that $15 or whatever, the big field stuff, not the higher dollar stuff, I do think those are the people that should probably just fade this 70% owned fighter, because in the end, if that dude somehow busts, which we've seen it happen many times, I've seen guys that this happens to with these fights get flipped and the dogs turn into favorites, or the guy was just mispriced to begin with, whatever it is, and they just don't score enough, Dan. Even if they don't lose, they just don't score enough, right? To be
last time we had a favorite like that. I mean, I specifically remember the Chris Gutierrez fight because I advocated for
Gutierrez was one. Well, did he even win? I can't even remember.
He won. He didn't score shit. He scored I believe he scored in the 60s, and I was getting.
But he was 6,900, I think.
I think different. He was in 7Ks, but I was getting absolutely fucking murdered in chat because I advocated for locking him, and everyone was like, "This guy's free square, blow this, that, and the other thing." And then by the end of the night, he was optimal. And guess what was happening in chat? Fucking crickets. So.
That's what you get, chat. I'll tell you right now, one thing about chat, I love chat, by the way. Our chat is the best, but one thing about chat, and I think everybody, for one thing, is they are too reactionary and won't let things play out. Way too reactionary to the moment. They just want that. I fucking got you, Dan. You fucking asshole. You said he was a lock, and he wasn't. They wanted that moment so bad. And then they're like, we got it. And then Dan at the end's like, no, you didn't. He's on the winner, which I do remember this happening. So and you were right. He was like 7,200 maybe.
Oh,
but
you know who we had last, actually, and this was recent, was fucking Jake Hadley.
He lost. He lost.
Yeah, he lost.
Yeah.
But you know what? Jake Hadley fucking sucks. He's terrible.
He sucks.
And recently, not re-signed, whatever it is. Like, hopefully, we will not be seeing him again.
He needs to not be re-signed. That fight was terrible. Like he got owned.
The matchmakers didn't even want to. He missed weight in his Contender Series fight. The matchmakers didn't want to sign him, and Dana overrode them and said, "No, I want this guy." And turns out the matchmakers were correct.
The matchmakers were right there for sure because that dude, he needs to be gone. He got absolutely destroyed.
Jake Hadley notwithstanding, I think these are spots, if you get a minus 740 at 8K, like this mid-range, like these 8K, 8,200 fighters, like this is a range that you want to live in a lot of the time. Like it does not take a whole lot for these 8K fighters to be optimal. And, just bringing up Gutierrez at like his 7K whatever price. Dos Santos, much more active on the feet. He's got much more power, much more fight ending ability. He's a BJJ black belt, so you've got submission upside there as well. Dos Santos is far and away a much better play. He's a much better play than we've had in these like smash value spots. I think he's probably like the best value play we've had in one of these spots. So like I said, I'm very strongly considering just locking him and getting different elsewhere. Because I don't think this Scroggin dude, how does he win outside of like Dos Santos, literally like fucking breaks his leg. That's and if that happens, then
outside of a fluke.
Yeah. If Dos Santos gets horribly injured in some fluky way, then I pack it up and move on to next week. But I think
I said, man, Dos Santos is tough, man. He's been in there with some good fighters, and even if he's lost, it's went to decision most of the time.
I think Scroggin, maybe one of his better attributes, it's not the striking. I think he's mainly trying to wrestle and grapple. Dos Santos recently has gone to, he went to a draw with Fakrdinov, who is a much better wrestler grappler than this Scroggin guy, obviously. He beat Benoit Saint Denis not too long ago. He lost to Randy Brown, but, pretty good account of himself. Randy Brown's a very talented fighter, much younger.
Different style too, Randy Brown. He's just like, I think he's more like he's going to be a stylistic tough matchup for certain people, and I think he was just a little tough to overcome. But I'm with you. This guy's got very little path.
Where it's sort of one of those situations where like a lock and a fade are kind of your two options. It's like you're either going to lock him in 100% of your lineups, or at least from my point of view, or full fade him. And there's no way I'm full fading a value like this at all.
I agree 100%. Either go in on it or just be out, because if he wins by any type of finish, he's optimal probably. Just like any type of finish at any point, he's probably optimal. So what you're hoping for is he wins a decision where there's very low volume and no wrestling, which, it could happen, I guess. It's possible. I don't know if he's going to come out there with a heavy wrestling game plan, to be honest. But, we'll see. Interesting fight, though, from a DFS perspective, just because of the ownership. I wanted to bring that up. Let's go.
Just one last thing. He's got the fourth best finishing odds on the entire card. The only people above him are Jillian Robertson, Abdul Malik, and Prates. And
that's another reason why he's going to be 70% owned, 100%.
They're all in the 9K range. So it's like, like 70% owned, probably not owned enough. The more we talk about it, the more I'm thinking like full on lock this guy.
Yeah, I know you're locking this guy. You were locking this guy before we talked about him. Now you're definitely locking this guy. All right, let's go to the next fight, women's fight, Carolina Kavich. Big dog here to Denise Gomez. Denise Gomez minus 575 here. Dan. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy here. But she's definitely the more dangerous fighter. We know what Kavich is. She's been around, a while, coming off a decision loss here. She's mainly a decision fighter now, and she's going to throw a lot out there, but I don't think it's going to scare Denise Gomes from moving forward. And I think Gomez is just going to have the bigger moments, like in the fight, and probably win a decision here. So from a DFS side, I'm just lower on this fight in general. I don't really want much of it, but I could see being on the Gomez side. I just like other studs a little more. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I like Gomez. She's only going to be 18% owned. So like up in this, and at 9,400, she's probably going to need a finish to make value. Kavich, she's old. She's definitely slowing down, but she doesn't really get finished. Like her fights are going to decision. She's getting outworked at the end of the day, but she doesn't really get finished. So it's a little bit sketchy, but I think, in this range, if you can, and especially on an 11 fight card, if you can get somebody at sub 20% owned, who's, minus 558 to win their fight, she has, she's got, her finish odds are not exactly what you want to see for the price, plus 175. But I mean, she's fighting someone who's nearly 40 years old, is probably on their way out. Like, I would not be surprised at all if this is Kavich's last fight. Good contrarian target. I'm not going to go super overboard because I've got her projected at 18%. Women's fights, especially, this high priced for those finish odds, I wouldn't be surprised if she came in closer to like 18. And, I'm a big fan of Gomez's style. Like, she's very aggressive. She goes out there, she wings bombs. Like, she does go out there looking for the finish. She didn't get it last time out against Mora, but, she was defending takedowns. There's more grappling heavy. She was more on the defense. Like, Kavich is going to go out there and she's just going to strike. So I think in a pure striking battle, like, Gomez is very live to find a finish. And if she does, like, she has a pretty decent chance to outscore the people around her. Although, like,
that's actually a really good point, Dan. This is gonna be, Kavich is gonna come forward and strike with her. So this is actually a perfect spot for someone like Gomez to win by knockout. So I kind of like Gomez a lot here. Maybe I'm flipping my pick to Gomez inside the distance instead of by decision, because you brought up pretty good points on the subject. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. Do you have her by finish or by decision? What do you have her at right now?
I mean, I picked her by decision, but like I said, like, a finish is absolutely like not out of the question. Like, she's probably not, she hasn't shown like too much on the ground by way of like submission. So her path to a finish is narrowed down to strictly a knockout. And again, like, Kavich, for all her faults, has been durable. So, there is some risk there, but the fact that she is so low owned, like, I'm willing to take on a bit of that risk. Like, I like coming in probably like mid to high 20s on her.
What's her ownership right now? Like 22? 23?
18%. So, like, also given, I'm probably locking Dos Santos, who, again, we just talked about, probably going to be 60 to 70% owned. You got to get different somewhere else. And, like, getting different in the top range is, it's like the higher someone's price, the more variance you kind of have like in their outcome. So even if she's not, projected to find the finish as much as the people in her range, when she does, she's contending for the optimal at very low ownership. So I like her a lot and I'm a fan of hers just in general. Like, she's aggressive. She blitzes forward. She throws in combinations. Yeah, I think she's a great contrarian play.
Yeah, a plus 275 by knockout. You don't see that a lot for a women's fight like this with a girl who has been durable. I mean,
she's got great power.
Yeah.
Like, and I, she's one of the youngest girls on the roster as well. So, that's always a thing to keep in mind when you've got like super young talents like her. Is every time you see them, they should be like leveling up each time. They should be getting better and better. So, very good showing in the Mora fight. Won that handedly, I think. I'm excited to see what she does today.
Yeah, I like it. I think the more I think about it, you're right. She's a good contrarian option, and I wasn't really going to be as high on her for DFS, but I might be flipping that a little bit because, like you said, getting a little different at the top is not a bad idea. And I already like Mullins anyway, so maybe a little Mullins Gomez pairing for the win here in DFS. I'm into it right now, so low ownership on both. All right, let's go to the next fight here. We've got Mansur Abdul Malik versus Dusko Todorovic. Todorovic sitting a pretty big dog here, plus 360 over on DraftKings Sportsbook. Abdul Malik sitting minus 470. We saw him on the Contender Series last time out, Dan. This dude looks like when you watch him walk out, you're gonna be like, oh shit, this guy's a beast. Like, and he is a beast. You know what I mean? Now he's got wrestling. He's got the striking or the power for sure. And honestly, they were talking about during the Contender Series, they were like, we haven't seen him go past a round, so we don't really know what his cardio. He, in the second round, he looked pretty calm. He looked, he didn't look like he was huffing and puffing out there. So that was a good sign. I think if this fight did go, past the first round, at least I've seen him go into the second round and look pretty composed and calm and stuff like that. And he's just one of those guys where he's got massive upside. He's got the wrestling. The ground and pound is absolutely elite. Like if he gets you down and he gets in a position where he can ground and pound you, you're probably going night. Those elbows, the elbows in the Contender Series when you watch, which the Contender Series fight was good. There was some good scrambles. He got taken down at one point. He fought off some adversity in the second round because the guy had some moments in the second round where he was winning the fight in the second round at certain points. And Abdul just kind of like fought through it and then got his own, got him to the ground and just ended up on top, just elbowing the shit out of him to the point where the ref had no choice but to stop. And he's got big upside for DFS though, because you combine the takedowns with, the massive finishing upside. He's a good DFS play, Dan. I assume he's going to be one of the more popular, top tier options on this slate though. So we got to talk about how we rank them obviously, but what are you doing with this fight?
I love Abdul Malik. I'm going to play him wherever I can, like wherever, ownership allows, because he is coming in at 44%. But I don't think Todorovic has anything for him. And like you spoke on all the positives about Abdul Malik, like, he's got a wrestling background. The cardio was a question, but yeah, we saw him. He slowed down a little bit in round 2, but like he fought his way out of some really bad spots and ultimately got the finish. The ground and pound is just absolutely hellacious. Like this guy is looking to finish you once he gets you on the ground. He's going to fucking smash you with his elbows and forearms. And it's just, it's brutal. He, to start the fight, he comes forward, he just wings bombs. Like he's trying to knock your head off into the fucking upper deck, like everything you love to see. He's definitely very green, but I'm not really concerned about what's coming back his way from Todorovic. Like, he's got pretty solid volume, but like he lacks power. He's very hittable. His offensive wrestling is super below average, so I don't think that's going to cause Malik any problems. Like his takedown accuracy is absolutely terrible. his takedown defense is absolutely terrible. Like, he's been taken down by some extremely low level competition. And then in the striking, like, he just walks himself into danger. Like, he keeps his hands low, he moves forward and just like has his chin up in the air, just asking to be pummeled. Last time we saw him was against CLD, and that fight ended. He injured his knee, I think. I don't know exactly what type of injury it was. So he's coming off like a 1.5 year layoff off of an injury. The durability and the fight IQ both in tandem are like a major, major concern. So like, I have little to no interest in Todorovic. I have him projected to come in 18%. I'm not going to come anywhere near that. I think it's Malik, hospital 130 all day.
Yeah. I'm with you here. So the question would then be, let's go. We'll get to Robertson, and then we'll kind of talk about, because the ranking of these guys, you got Prates and all these 9K guys, I think is going to be crucial to do something like that with the rankings here. So we'll get to that, but we both agree on this one. It's Malik or Abdul Malik all day. Let's go to the next fight here. Jillian Robertson going up against Luana Pinero. Robertson sitting a minus almost 400 favorite right now on DraftKings Sportsbook. 9,200 for Robertson. And we know her game. I mean, she's an elite, very elite grappler. This thing gets down to the mat, she is going to be live to finish literally anybody. That's her skill, and she dominates that skill. And she's shown it off in pretty much all her fights for the most part. Control time, that's another thing. You got the control time down. So she's got upside scoring. You get the takedowns, you get the big control time, and the possible finishing upside, is there for someone like Jillian Robertson against the girl in Pinero, who just got finished by Angie Hill by submission, of all things here. So when you get submitted by Angie Hill, which, I mean, listen, Angela Hill has been awesome. She's great. And I love that she got the finish there. But that has to raise concerns when you go from that fight to someone who is absolute elite of elite in grappling, finishing so many by submission, and you got to fight that girl next. That's tough right there. So I think this is Jillian all day. I think she's going to win by finish. I already bet her by submission. But the real question is, how do you rank the upside with these studs here, Dan? And we could kind of get into it right now if you want, just because I think that's more of a conversation. But first, I assume you're with me on Jillian Roberts, but talk about it real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Robertson. I've got her ranked just below Malik. So, I mean, the way I have it is I've got it Prates, Gomez, Malik, Robertson, Deritter, and keeping in mind that like my rankings, they do take ownership into account, and Jillian is projected to be like 10-11% lower owned than Malik, and I still have him rated above her. Having said all that, like she's got a very clear path in this fight. Like, this is a very binary matchup. I think, like, more often than not, she is going to get the fight down to the mat. And once she does, like, she's going to absolutely dominate. Like, Pinero does not have very good takedown defense, like you mentioned, like, she was submitted by Angela Hill. And as much as we love Angela Hill, like, that is not her game. And it's not the first time that she's been like taken down, out wrestled, out grappled by primary strikers. That's happened to her multiple times. So, you're throwing her to someone like Jillian Robertson, which all she wants to do is grapple, and she's extremely proficient at it. I think, it all sets up for like Robertson to absolutely dominate her on the mat. The one thing I will say is Pinero, for the division, has like very solid power. She's probably the better striker. She doesn't throw as much as you would like to see, but she is dangerous early. So I think she is live in the sense that, like, if she can keep it on the feet, and if she can, if she shows just like a little bit more aggression and throws a little bit more, like she's definitely live to knock Robertson out. Because for as much as
the one thing though she's got to be careful of is overextending. I know she doesn't throw a lot,
for
but
sure,
you got to be careful when you overextend, which she will do at times because, like you said, she does have power. That's when you're in trouble for getting taken down, and I wonder if she's going to be a little more hesitant to go for it like that against someone like Jillian Robertson, where you kind of leave an opening to put this thing on the ground where you don't want to be against this girl.
right? We see fighters do that all the time, where like their best path would be to be aggressive in the early going and throw, but they are scared to, and that is like. It's always so like counterproductive. Like what immediately jumps to mind is like Michel Pereira, like in his 5-rounder against Fluffy, where it was like, his greatest strength is being aggressive and going for the kill. But, he's in a 5-round fight and he's probably cognizant of the fact that like, oh, I'm a bit of a gasser and I want to like preserve my gas tank. It's like, that's all well and good, but, doesn't really matter if, you're not getting if you're not playing to your strength, like you're probably fucked anyway, so I obviously, like I said before, like more often than not I expect Robertson to get this to the mat and dominate, but in this 7K and below range, I think Pinero, you've got Pinero, Todorovic, Kavich, Scroggin, and then Magny, who we'll talk about later, like her at 17%.
That's such a bad range. That's such a bad range.
And I purposely left out Mearshart, who's like one above her, because he is like obviously a much better play, but he's going to be 30% owned. So like Pinero at like mid to low teens, I think she's a fine like play to mix in. Again, like she's not going to be.
Got to have the highest upside, like you said, of all those trash bags you just put in there.
Exactly, because
like,
she is.
Who's 2 in that, Dan? Who would you put as 2?
In this range, honestly, I would I'd probably put Kavich just because
Oh God,
exactly. But she is hard to put away. It's women's MMA. She is much more experienced. She's fought the top of the division and she throws a ton of volume. So if Gomez isn't getting her out of there, and just to go back to that fight real quickly, like if Gomez isn't getting Kavich out of there, and this is just like turns into a pure like back and forth striking battle. We talked about bad judging. Would you really be surprised if Kavich like edged out a split decision win? And then,
no,
with the amount of volume she throws at 6,800, that's optimal. Like it's not super.
Again, we go back to the judging standpoint of like, okay, are we going back to is volume king? Is damage king? Bigger? What's king in that scenario? How are we judging this fight? So, I mean,
you don't know. Like, we don't know who's judging. I have no handle on like how the individual judges view. If the judges are even consistent within themselves, like you just don't know what's going through these guys' heads. So
yeah, like I don't know, when you throw pillows and you just throw, but they're just absolute pillows. Are those like? Are we ranking them the same? Like, how are we judging those type of strikers? Because there's some pillows that get thrown in some of these women's, MMA contests. And do you just judge them the same? I assume they just judge them the same, right? Like, volume is volume. They just.
Who knows, man? Who knows?
I've no. That's my point, though. Like, I always wondered, like, significant strikes. Like, how do you judge that in a lot of these women MMA fights? Where, to be honest with you, it's like. How do you know like really that's got to be harder to judge than anything.
Well, they're judged much more leniently. That's why we like targeting women's fights in general, is because more of their strikes are counted as significant. You get more upsets.
Even if they're clearly not significant, like at all. So
exactly.
All right. That was a good little breakdown there of Robertson Pinero. Good fight. It's a good fight. And I think, did you rank your 9K guys? Did you rank them, Dan?
I did. Yeah. But I can go over it again. So I've got, Gomez, Malik, Robertson, and Deritter in that order.
Okay. Yeah.
But, I will say, like, it's
that's with ownership taken into account, right? I'm assuming.
Ownership taken into account. Yeah. Malik has the edge on Robertson, even though he's higher on. Like Gomez is way up there because she's going to be solo owned. Yeah, she would probably be a little bit lower if not for the ownership. But like, again, you got 11 fights. I got a guy I want to lock. I want to go heavy on Prates, who's got a much, much better inside the distance line and is getting, I don't really see too many paths to fitting both Prates and Gomez in there. So
yeah,
it's a tough slate. It's a tough slate.
You can.
You're just gonna have to play. You're gonna have to play some trash.
You're gonna have to play a couple trash cans, that's for sure. Shout out to my guy NYG. Appreciate you. One of the sharper guys we got in the industry in our Discord. NYG fan 56. Guy crushes all sports, not just MMA. He crushes literally all sports. So shout out to my guy NYG fan. All right, let's go. We've got a few more fights left to break down. Gaston Balanos, plus 205 dog to Cortavius. Ramos, minus 250 favorite over on DraftKings Sportsbook. These guys are different. Gaston wants to stay on the feet, is more of a striker. I don't think he's a great defensive striker. Like, I think he's very hittable. He leaves himself open to be hit a lot, especially when he's trying to throw heavy. He'll just leave his chin right out there for people to tag. And so although he wants to stay on the feet, his defense is not very good. Defensive strength is not very good. So I don't love that about him, but he does have a little bit of power and he can get it done on the feet, which is clearly where he wants this fight to be, because Ramos is he's got power. I wouldn't call him a striker though, because he honestly tends to just want to brawl when he's out there striking for too long. And you'll hear his coaches, even in the last fight where he switched gyms and everything after he got knocked out in his first Contender Series fight, even in his last fight where he won and he won by decision, you could hear his coaching staff multiple times during the fight where he'd start to brawl and them just literally start yelling, "Don't brawl, get out of there, like stop doing that." And it's just something though, Dan, like some of these guys, like they just can't help it at some point. They just they revert back to what, bad habits or what they've done in the past and stuff like that. And but this kid is very talented. I think he's got power. His skills on the mat are extremely good. He fought pretty much a soul grappler last time out and out grappled him, but he knew that was his main path, was grappling. And so he didn't try and go for takedowns himself or really grapple too much. The grappling exchanges were more engaged by his opponent, and he was stuffing takedowns and scrambling to his feet, throwing up arm bars. This dude, when it gets to the mat, he's extremely live for a finish. He's got multiple wins by armbar. I think 3 of his last 4 wins are by armbar. So extremely dangerous off his back, or whenever this gets to the mat. So I like Ramos here. I'm not a big fan of Balanos just in general. I think his strengths aren't always even his strengths because of his defensive striking lapses. But again, that's where he needs this to be. And what he's going to try and do is get Ramos to brawl with him, because that's his path, which for DFS is good. So I do think this fight is interesting, because if Ramos wins, I think he takes him down. He finds a way to submit him. And, does he get a boatload of takedowns? I don't know about that. But I do think it could be somewhat quick. So I think this fight is a good fight to target. And if Balanos wins, I think he sucked him into a brawl, and he ends up, he gets the clip, and, that's how he would win. I don't think he's going to win a decision, because I think the grappling is just going to be too one-sided. Ramos can go to that whenever he wants. So I got Ramos here winning. I got him winning inside the distance, but a solid fight for DFS, I think.
Yeah, I like both sides. I mean, both sides of this fight for DFS. I definitely think this finishes inside the distance. like you said, Balanos, his best path really is like to get a knockout. I don't think he's going to win a decision. So 7,500. You know, Romeus, I definitely prefer him. I think like, you know, he's more athletic, you know, he's explosive, he's quick. I think the physicality is on his side as well, but like you already mentioned, it's like the ground game, the grappling, he is worlds better than Balanos. Balanos, you know, he's got really poor takedown defense. He can be controlled. His get up is like okay, but he tends to give up his back, which against a guy like Romeus who has, you know, a distinct grappling advantage and is a pretty dangerous submission artist. Like I think that's going to be a huge, like if he gives up his back, it's probably over. And like you said, he's also very hittable. So Romeus, you know, he's got pretty decent power. So we've got multiple paths to a finish for Romeus. You know, on the Bolaños side, you know, Romeo's got knocked out in 29 seconds in his Contender Series debut, which, you know, is a massive red flag no matter what. Like I like him much more, but you know, it's not really something you ever want to ignore. So Bolaños, despite all of his, you know, technical skill deficiencies, whatever, he's absolutely live to land a knockout. And at 7,500, that's definitely going to be optimal. So I think this is a fight that you definitely want to target both sides for sure.
Yep, I agree with you. No, you can't steal another man's bit, Jimmy. Can't do it. Dan just refuses to do it. Pinero, thank God. I don't know if I could have gotten through a whole show if you didn't show up. So I'm glad that you're here now, because I don't know how I'd get on. Yeah, Andy, appreciate you as well in the chat. Always love the chatters. Appreciate it. All right. So we're both. Did you say you're on the Ramos side, or which side are you on? I didn't.
Yeah, I'm on Romeus for sure.
Okay.
I think you know, betting wise, like minus 226 is a little bit steep. Again, especially for a guy who got knocked out in 30 seconds
it is steep. Yeah.
In his first Contender Series fight. But I think for DFS, like this is a solid fight to target both sides of.
All right, let's go to the next fight. I agree with that. It's a good fight for DFS. We've got Deritter, your boy. I saw you talking him up a little bit in chat a while back. I think you were talking about it'd be cool to get him on the UFC scene for some fighting here. You were talking about him, right? That was you were talking about him.
I just think it's very questionable to like, you know, you sign this like double champ from one, which by the way, the one card last night was fucking sick. Like I haven't caught too many one cards, but last night's was pretty incredible. Anyway, like the guy Deritter last fought and won was in the heavyweight main event. I just think it's like odd to take a new signing like Deritter and kind of like stick him in the apex. You know what I mean? You know me, I'm like really.
That's right. That's what we were talking about this. That's what we were talking about. Yeah.
I'm highly critical of the apex in general. I think it's just kind of like a soulless venue. I'm not a fan. I wish that I mean, they have said that they're going to hit the road more in the coming year. It will be under construction. I'm hoping that the construction expansion of the apex, whatever, means, you know, more seating. Maybe you could get like more of a crowd in there. I believe there was like a wrestling event in there, NXT, I think, and you know they had a pretty.
I hope that's what they mean by it. I hope that's what they mean by it.
Yeah, the atmosphere was much better. Like I think if they pivot away from, like, I understand, like one of their guys, I forget who it was talking about, you know, like the benefit to having these house shows. And I totally get it. Like it makes sense. A lot of fighters live in Vegas. You can make a lot more things happen. Just bring the atmosphere up, man. Like fights are meant to be put in front of people. Like they're always better with a crowd. Like the Royval Tyra.
I think all the fighters would agree with that too.
Yeah, And if you watch, we had Royval Tyra, which arguably one of the fights of the year. They had it in the Apex, and the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, this is a great fucking fight. Like, imagine if there was a crowd for this, because the crowd would be losing their fucking minds, and the atmosphere would just be like off the charts. So, I think it's a little questionable that they bring this guy into the Apex, but putting all that aside,
I think it's a protection of their investment.
It could be. I think it's that's fine. They're putting him in there against GM3, which, I tend to think.
I don't know if that was a protection of their investment. I think that's a test. Like, let's see what this guy has.
Yeah, it's a tough first fight.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I think they could have gave him. I think if they wanted to give him a complete layup, they would have gave him someone who's got holes in grappling, not someone whose main game is grappling.
Yeah, and he's dangerous, like extremely dangerous. Like, this is this fight is going to catch ownership on both sides. RDR 33%, GM3 30%. I don't mind. I don't mind being right there with the field. We're going to have to like make some concessions somewhere on like the lineup levels, but GM3 at 7,100, he's always live to catch a sub off of his back. The guy is a dog. He's tough. He doesn't go away. I mean, he does have some durability concerns, but I'm not really too concerned with him getting knocked out here, because RDR, that's like not super his game. Like, he's definitely a primary grappler. Like, he wants to grapple the shit out of you. I think he will. Like, I think that he does definitely have like physicality advantages here. I think he's got some skill advantages here. The only person that's really been able to give RDR substantial problems was dude who fought last night. In one, what was his name? It's a Russian name, so I'm gonna have to like look it up. I can't.
It's like Mikhailov or something like that.
It is Anatoly Malikin. Yeah. So, Malikin. This fight is at middleweight.
He is like extremely Russian too. When you watch him, he's like a big motherfucking he's a big dude.
Yeah, he's massive.
Not a bad dude either. He's like skilled. Like, he's not a scrub. He's legit. Like,
but those are RDR's 2 losses are against like him as a true middleweight going up against a true heavyweight, and like not for nothing, Malikin did like beat the absolute piss out of him, but
he made him quit, Dan.
Yeah, he couldn't get up.
Quit.
In the 3rd round, he took a hell of a beating leading up to that, though. So the toughness, to me, like the toughness durability, isn't really in question. I think he has the skills to win this, and
it literally has TKO retirement next to that loss.
Did you watch it? It's like,
I watched it. I literally watched it. Herb was like, get up, and he was just like laying on his back. And
I don't blame him.
Nope.
I don't blame him. But he won't be at a size disadvantage here. He's actually going to be the taller guy by about 3 inches. He's got a reach advantage. Like I already mentioned, he's got a physicality advantage here. I think he also has a skill advantage. I really like RDR in this fight. I picked him to win inside the distance. But we can never count out GM3 ever. I believe he has the most submission wins in the division, and it's because he is, he is like the definition of the crafty vet that you can never count out. Like, he's always live to just like, you think you've got him beat, and all of a sudden he's like snatching up your arm, he's snatching up your neck, he's choking you the fuck out. So, I think whoever wins this fight is going to be a super strong contender for the optimal, and I'm going to be on both sides of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm gonna bet GM3 just because plus 260. I think he's,
our boy Steve
very live.
GM 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, this is a legit grappling match. We're gonna watch these two, because Ritter's he's not like changing his game plan. His game plan's the same. He's going to get you down try and get you down to the ground as many times as possible, and try and get a finish from there. But his game is not striking. His strike, and Meerschaert's game is not striking. This is how bad though Ritter's striking is, that it's like, I mean, I think Meerschaert's got more power than him. I think Mearshart, if someone gets knocked out, I think it's Mearshart knocking him out, not the other way around.
That's
So
interesting because like RDR has only been knocked out by a true heavyweight, and Mearshart has been knocked out plenty of times.
oh, he's been knocked out. I just don't think he has. I don't think that's his game though, Dan.
No, it's not.
From what I've watched of him, like he doesn't go for it. Is my point. Mearshart will at least like go for it when he's like out of it. He'll just go for it. This dude's not going to do that. He's going for takedowns. He's going to get you down on the ground and find a way. I don't think he's going to stand and bang. Like, do you think he's going to stand and bang even with Mearshart?
No, I don't think either of these guys are been doing that.
Like, whereas I could see Mearshart like, okay, this dude's coming in. I know he's coming in, and he somehow catches him coming in. Like, that's very possible. I think that is just more my take. But yeah, so I'm more on the Mearshart side. But from a DFS perspective, I mean, Ritter's got all the upside because if he gets a bunch of takedowns or something like that, we could be seeing a big boy score here. So yeah, the cardio is a concern on both sides too. So.
I think we're probably getting an early finish here. But 9,100, like he is like the least expensive in the 9K range. And his like super grappling heavy style is probably the most, him and Robertson have like the best style for DraftKings to score like mega high. So
Abdul has a really good style too.
Yeah, wrestling heavy. I mean, I think the knockout is kind of more it's kind of more how he's gonna win. So that to me is like a little sketchier than like these.
It's like a takedown and ground and pound to death.
Yeah,
but maybe it is just straight knockout or anything like that.
None of those three, like Malik, Robertson, Deritter, like there isn't a whole ton of separation among them.
Yeah,
I actually have Deritter, ranked the lowest out of those three, probably because obviously it's because of the numbers, but also just throw in, which we already mentioned, like GM3 is dangerous. Like he's probably.
Are you higher? It's probably because you're higher on the dog in that fight than you are in the other two fight dogs.
That's what it is. Is GM3, as an opponent is,
at least more dangerous than the other guys, right? He's definitely got more like upside from a finishing perspective. Obviously, he's got like with GM3, you're getting like either a really, really bad score or you're getting a really good score. I don't know if there's a middle with GM3.
There's no middle.
None. So that's the problem with guys like GM3. But when he finishes and he's, that cheap on a card where I think we all think, there's not going to be that many dogs that put up big scores.
Yeah.
He could just make your whole team if someone like him, let's say him and Santos get there, right? Or something like that. Then it just makes your whole team so much easier, building. Cause then it's just, you got a bunch of like expensive guys to go with it and you got your values that kind of got there. So yeah, maybe you need like one other mid-tier guy, but that's all you on this card. If you can get one like really cheap guy to get optimal like that, like that's what you're looking for, is because you're probably not going to be like that many. Probably going to be one, maybe two that are that cheap. So, all right, that's that fight. I think, are you betting GM3 or are you betting Deritter?
Let's see, what's GM3? I don't know. I think I probably like Deritter inside the distance more than I like GM3, like money line. Yeah, like Deritter is like plus 110 inside the distance. I think that's like a pretty solid bet. I think he gets it done.
Dan, what do you think? Loser on this card? I think it's possible.
Yeah, let me just see. Yeah, usually you need no dogs to win, and I think that's like probably a little thin on a card this low level.
There's only 11 fights.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I think if you're going to build with that in mind, it's not as if, you build with that in mind and it just,
I wouldn't be stacking fights is what I'll say.
No, absolutely no stacking fights. But I think that kind of like point of view, because, it's really hard for people to click the button on someone that they just straight up think is going to lose. But if you kind of like
Yeah.
open your mind to the possibility of like maybe there's a loser on here, it sort of like it makes you more willing to click the button on these like.
Well, I don't think people should think about it like that, though. I think when people build DFS lineups and they're putting people in their lineups, they should be saying, okay, what's this person's path to a victory?
Right.
What's this
Yeah,
person's path to the optimal? Because you at least have to think in your head they have a path. Even if the path is super thin, that's how you should view building your DFS lineups when you pick your dogs. Because obviously, when you put a dog like GM3 in there, you're like, okay, well, like this dude has a path to be clearly not optimal, but he also has that, you know, big upside path of maybe he gets the sub in round one, and you know, maybe he's the one that gets the finish early, you know, and ends up there. Or like Dan talked about with Pinero, where it's like, hey, listen, the path is probably thin, right, against Jillian Robertson, but what's her path? Her path is catching her with a big shot. She does have power, even though she doesn't do a lot of volume, and that's her path. She gets the knockdown and she gets a finish. Like that's how I think people should be looking at it. Not like I'm just throwing the loser in my lineup. Like, which loser am I throwing in there? No, pick the loser who, but also think of it like who has the best path, even if it is small, to be optimal. Stay away from more of the decision fighters in those scenarios where it's like, decision win for this girl probably isn't getting me there. Unless it's like maybe Kavich. She's probably the only one that like maybe the volume, Dan, right, in a win could get her there.
And so John is clarifying, like he looks at it, who can score the most in a loss. I mean, that's more or less like who, you know, that you're kind of like splitting hairs between like who can score the most in a loss and who's most live to win. Because if you're scoring well in a loss, then you're being competitive in the fight. So, you know, I was just kind of thinking about it more from like, you know, people do have a hard time clicking buttons on these dogs. So sometimes just mentally, it's kind of helpful to be like, well, maybe they could even score well in a loss. You know, at the end of the day, you're probably going to need 6 winners, but you know, anybody who's going to score well in a loss is also live to win, I think is the point.
Yep. All right, let's get to the final fight on the card. I don't know how much discussion we'll have on this one. Neil Magny, Carlos Prates, minus 800 here on this card. It is interesting that they put the main event fight, and it's the biggest line on the card, is the biggest favorite on the card is Carlos Prates in the main event against gatekeeper Neil Magny. Dan, do you have this thing just finishing inside the distance here? Do you think Neil Magny can figure out a way to stay safe for, you know, a decision?
I've got Prates inside the distance. You know, it's interesting that we bring up like a loser and the winner, because I've been thinking, you know, 9,600 for Carlos Prates, like as much as I think he gets it done and probably in the first round, like Prates is a slow starter and he doesn't throw a whole lot of volume. Like his whole thing is like, he's a sniper. Like he is very powerful, very accurate. He doesn't throw a ton of volume. He doesn't wrestle. He doesn't grapple. His defensive wrestling and grappling are big question marks. And like, what is Neil Magny's game predicated on? It's basically, you know, using his IQ, grappling you, clinching you up against the cage. So like, if you're talking about a loser that can hit the winner, like, is there a world where Carlos Prates gets like a round 3 win, doesn't, you know, make the optimal because he's scoring like, you know, 70 or 80 points, even with a finish?
I think that's very possible.
And then Magny at 6,600, who's been, you know, he's been getting, if he racks up some control time, if he gets a takedown or two, like, you know, at 6,600, you could have a world where Prates wins in the later rounds and Magny is optimal and he's not. So, you know, I imagine most people will want to outright fade Magny. I even questioned, you know me, I'm usually all for like going full shove on these 5-round fights. I question that some on this card just because of my concerns with Prates' ceiling at the price. So
I'm questioning it too, because I think we're going to see multiple big scores out of these studs, and you know, Prates is going to come in. He's going to come in very popular, right? Like he's just going to be very popular. So
I think the answer to that is actually to, play like I have Magny projected to be like 17% owned. I wouldn't be surprised if he came in lower or higher than that. Like I could see it go either way, probably lower though, or right at that. Our ownership is usually pretty accurate. I think I'm going to stick with locking the 5-round fight. It's not projecting to come. It's projecting to come in like maybe mid 60s, 70% owned. So, as hard as it is at times to like stick with your process because you've got, external forces kind of being like, get away from that. I think I'm still going to stick with doing it. And the answer there is just going to be come in much higher on Magny than the field. I don't think he's going to win. I think Prates absolutely is going to wreck his shit. Like one of Magny's like major Achilles heels, no pun intended, is like he's super susceptible to leg kicks. Like he just does not defend leg kicks. And anybody that goes out there and invests in the leg kicks early and often just completely wrecks his shit every single time. And Prates, he uses his range extremely well. His kicks are extremely powerful and violent, and he comes from a camp fighting nerds that like their game plans are top notch. Like it's a very smart camp. So if I'm seeing it, if a lot of people are seeing this, like, Prates is going to know, just beat the shit out of Magny's legs and you're golden.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that was kind of be my take too, is just like, I think the range at which Carlos Prates wants to fight at is the opposite of what Neil Magny wants to do. So it's kind of like a stylistically tough matchup, I think, for someone like Neil Magny. Is like how to get inside, but stay safe when you get inside, because this dude's a sniper. And although the volume might not be like crazy, he's got good accuracy and he's going to snipe you when you come in. So you got to be really careful about your entries and how you go about, getting to that clinch or whatever. And I think he's going to have a really tough time with the kicks of Carlos Prates because they're dangerous. And I think they're going to play a big part in this fight. So yeah, I'm probably lower on this fight than the field for DFS, but I do think Prates finds a finish, whether it's, the second round or the third round. I think he's going to find a finish here. I think he knows it. I think he's going to come in kind of like just almost like waiting for it, right? Because he knows at some point Magny's going to want to, get close to him. And so, it's almost like a knockout's going to present itself at some point. He's just got to wait. And like you said, the camp that he fights at, they're really smart. So they know what they're doing. And I think they'll have a good game plan for him. So yeah, that's all 11 fights. Man, Dan, we only went like an hour and 45 minutes on a shitty ass card. So that's pro job right there from Dan and myself, I think. But hope you guys enjoyed the show, and obviously RPS 15% off. If you guys want to come hang out with us in the Discord, get all the content. Obviously, we have MMA, but all the sports included: NFL, NBA. We have single sport packages though. If you're just looking for single sport, check us out. Hit the like button too on your way out. Dan, do you have a favorite bet for the people before we get out of here?
No, favorite bet. Do you have a favorite bet? Give me a sec.
Yes, Melissa Mullins. Melissa Mullins inside the distance, baby. Let's do it. She's going to run right through this chick.
Melissa, no mess. What was the one I gave out? Yeah, RDR inside the distance.
Oh, favorite. Okay, there you go. All right, that's going to do it here for this show, guys. Good luck in your DFS contest and your bets. For Dan and myself, we'll see you guys next week. We're out.